It was one of those scorching summer days where the heat seems to press down on you like a physical weight. The kind of day where the air shimmers above the asphalt and the cicadas sing their endless drone from the trees. I was in my backyard, stretched out on a lounger, trying to catch some sun while finishing the novel I'd been neglecting for weeks. My small suburban backyard wasn't much, but I'd made it into a little oasis with potted plants, string lights, and a privacy fence that separated my property from my neighbors. My neighbor. Mark had moved in about 8 months ago, and from the moment I saw him carrying boxes into his house, I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. You know the one. That mixture of attraction and dread when you realize you're developing feelings for someone completely unavailable. Mark was the definition of unavailable, straight, recently divorced, and seemingly oblivious to the effect he had on me. Let me tell you about Mark. He stood just over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that tapered down to a narrow waist, the kind of physique that came from actual physical labor rather than hours at the gym. His dark hair was always slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck in a way that made my fingers itch to brush through it. He had these expressive hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was often. Mark was the kind of guy who waved at everyone on the street, who remembered the names of all the neighborhood dogs, who offered to help carry groceries without making it seem like a chore. Our friendship had developed slowly over shared property line conversations. First, it was just polite nods, then brief chats about the weather, and eventually, we graduated to borrowing lawn tools and bringing in each other's mail when one of us was away. I'd invited him over for barbecues with my friends, and he'd asked me to watch his place when he visited his parents in Ohio. It was a comfortable, neighborly relationship, at least on the surface. Beneath that surface, though, I was constantly battling my attraction to him. I'd catch myself staring a little too long when he was mowing his lawn shirtless or finding excuses to walk by his house when I knew he'd be home. It was pathetic, really, this schoolboy crush on my straight neighbor. I'd been down this road before and knew exactly where it led. Nowhere good. So I kept my feelings locked away, determined to be nothing more than the friendly gay neighbor. That's why what happened that day caught me so completely off guard. I was lost in my book, the sun warming my skin, when a shadow fell across the pages. I looked up, squinting against the brightness, to see Mark standing at the edge of my patio. He was wearing nothing but a pair of navy blue swim trunks that hung low on his hips, revealing a trail of dark hair that disappeared beneath the waistband. His chest was already glistening with sweat, and I had to force myself not to stare. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice carrying that slight Midwestern twang that I found endlessly charming. "Sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you had any sunscreen I could borrow. I'm heading to the community pool, and I just realized I'm out." Such a simple request. So ordinary. The kind of thing neighbors ask each other all the time. Yet my heart was suddenly hammering in my chest like I'd just run a marathon. "Sure," I managed to say, setting my book aside and getting to my feet. "I've got some in the house. I'll grab it for you." I hurried inside, grateful for the moment to compose myself. This was ridiculous. He was asking for sunscreen, not proposing marriage. I took a deep breath, found the bottle in my bathroom cabinet, and returned to the patio where Mark was waiting, absently scrolling through his phone. "Here you go," I said, holding out the bottle. "SPF 50. I burn easily, so I don't mess around with the weak stuff." Mark laughed, taking the bottle from me. "Thanks, man. I'm the same way. Irish ancestry. We're basically vampires in the sun." I expected him to thank me and leave, but instead, he uncapped the bottle and squeezed some of the white lotion into his palm. I watched, transfixed, as he began to spread it across his chest, his large hands moving in circular motions over his skin. The sunscreen left glistening trails across his pectorals, highlighting the definition there. "Would you mind getting my back?" he asked, holding out the bottle to me. I can never reach it all. I swallowed hard. This was a normal request, I reminded myself. Friends did this for each other all the time. It didn't mean anything. "Sure," I said, taking the bottle from him. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, slightly higher than usual. Mark turned around, presenting his broad back to me. I squeezed some sunscreen into my palm, rubbed my hands together, and then placed them on his shoulders. His skin was warm beneath my touch, smooth but firm with muscle. I began to move my hands in slow circles, spreading the lotion across his shoulder blades, down the ridge of his spine, to the small of his back just above the waistband of his swim trunks. I could feel the tension in his muscles, the slight shift as he adjusted his stance. "That feels good," he murmured, and I nearly dropped the bottle. I've had a knot in my shoulder all week from helping my buddy move. I focused on keeping my breathing steady as I worked the sunscreen into his skin, trying to be thorough but quick. When I finished, I stepped back, wiping my hands on my shorts. "All done," I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. Mark turned around, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. His eyes seemed darker somehow, his gaze more intense. "Thanks," he said, then held out the bottle. "Your turn." I blinked at him, confused. "My turn. You're out here in the sun too," he pointed out. "Don't want you burning that fair skin of yours." Before I could process what was happening, Mark had moved behind me. I felt his hands on my shoulders, gently turning me around. I was wearing only a pair of shorts, my chest already bronzed from previous sunbathing sessions. Still, I didn't protest as I felt the cool lotion hit my back, followed immediately by the warm pressure of Mark's hands. His touch was different from what I expected. Not the quick, efficient application of a friend helping out, but something slower, more deliberate. His thumbs pressed into the muscles along my spine, almost like a massage, and I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. His hands were large enough to span nearly the width of my back, and he used that to his advantage, covering my skin in long, sweeping motions. "You're tense," he commented, his voice closer to my ear than I'd anticipated. "You should relax more." Easy for him to say. How was I supposed to relax when my straight neighbor was essentially giving me a back massage in my own backyard? But I tried to loosen my shoulders, to breathe normally, to act like this was all perfectly ordinary. When he finished with my back, I expected him to stop. Instead, his hands moved to my shoulders, then down my arms, applying sunscreen with the same methodical attention. I stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over us. "Turn around," he said softly, and I did, facing him now. Mark squeezed more sunscreen into his palm, then placed his hands on my chest. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I had to fight to keep my expression neutral. His fingers spread the lotion across my pectorals, down to my abdomen. When his hands reached my stomach, his movements slowed even further, his fingers tracing the subtle definition of my muscles there. I watched his face as he worked, trying to read his expression. His eyes were focused on his task, his lips slightly parted in concentration. There was a flush to his cheeks that hadn't been there before, and I wondered if it was just from the heat. "You work out," he said, his voice lower than usual. It wasn't a question. Sometimes, I managed to reply. "Nothing serious." His thumbs traced small circles just above the waistband of my shorts, and I felt my breath catch. This had crossed some invisible line, hadn't it? This wasn't how straight men applied sunscreen to their male friends. Yet I couldn't bring myself to say anything, to break the moment. "There," he said finally, his hands lingering on my stomach for a moment before slowly pulling away. All protected from the sun now. I looked up at him, searching his face for some explanation, some acknowledgement of what had just happened between us. But his expression had shifted back to casual friendliness, though there was still something in his eyes I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for the sunscreen," he said, handing the bottle back to me. "I should get going if I want to get a good spot at the pool." "No problem," I replied automatically. "Anytime." He gave me a smile. Was it my imagination, or did it seem slightly different than his usual grin? And then he was walking away, back through the gate that connected our yards. I stood there, bottle in hand, feeling like I'd just experienced some kind of strange dream. The rest of the day passed in a blur of confusion and replayed memories. I kept going over every second of our interaction, analyzing each touch, each word, looking for meaning. Had Mark's hands lingered too long? Had that look in his eyes meant something? Or was I just projecting my own desires onto an innocent interaction? Let me explain why this moment mattered so much to me. When you're gay, you learn early on to read between the lines, to look for subtle signals and hidden meanings. You become hyper-aware of touch, of glances that last a second too long, of the spaces between words. It's a survival mechanism in a world where assuming the wrong thing can lead to embarrassment at best and danger at worst. But it also means you're constantly questioning yourself, wondering if you're seeing something that isn't there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the feel of Mark's hands on my stomach, the intensity in his eyes, the unusual slowness of his movements. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd projected my own feelings onto a perfectly innocent interaction. The next few days were awkward, at least from my perspective. I found myself avoiding the backyard, afraid of running into Mark. When I did see him, waving from his driveway or checking his mail, I gave him a friendly but distant greeting, unsure of how to act around him now. It wasn't until the following weekend that we spoke again. I was washing my car in the driveway, music playing from a portable speaker, when Mark appeared, carrying a six-pack of beer. "Peace offering," he said, holding up the beers. I feel like things have been weird since the other day. My heart skipped a beat. So I hadn't imagined it. There had been something unusual about our interaction. "It's fine," I said, turning off the hose. "Nothing to apologize for." Mark set the beer down on my front step and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd noticed he did when he was nervous. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe inside." I nodded, suddenly nervous myself. I led him into my house, through the living room to the kitchen. He sat at the island while I grabbed 2 beers from the pack he'd brought, opening them and sliding one across to him. "So," I said, when the silence had stretched too long. "So," he echoed, picking at the label on his beer bottle. "I think I owe you an explanation for the other day." I took a sip of my beer, waiting for him to continue. "The thing is," he started, then stopped, shaking his head. "God, this is harder than I thought it would be." "You don't have to explain anything," I assured him, though I was desperate to hear what he had to say. "No, I do," he insisted. "Because it wasn't fair to you, what I did. The sunscreen thing, it wasn't just about sunscreen." My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "What was it about then?" Mark looked up at me, his hazel eyes meeting mine directly for the first time in days. "I've been curious. About you. About men in general, I guess, but mostly about you." The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I took another sip of my beer, buying time to process his words. "How long?" I finally asked. "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "It's not like there was a specific moment. More like a gradual realization. I've always known I was attracted to women, but lately, I've been wondering if that's the whole story." I nodded, understanding all too well the confusion of questioning one's sexuality. "And the sunscreen?" A flush crept up his neck. "An excuse to touch you. To see if what I was feeling was real, or just, I don't know, some kind of phase or something." "And?" I prompted when he didn't continue. "What did you figure out?" Mark's eyes met mine again, and this time there was no mistaking the heat in them. That it wasn't a phase. That when I touched you, it felt right in a way I wasn't expecting. The admission sent a wave of warmth through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was delicate territory. Mark was still figuring things out, and the last thing I wanted was to push him too far too fast. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully. "And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to you. But you're still working through some big questions, and I don't want to be an experiment." "You wouldn't be," he said quickly. "I mean, I know I'm still figuring things out, but my feelings for you are real, Alex. They've been growing for months." I studied his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty or confusion. What I saw instead was openness, vulnerability, and a touch of fear, the same emotions I was feeling myself. "So what are you suggesting?" I asked. Mark took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting we see where this goes. Slowly. No pressure, no expectations. Just us spending time together and being honest about what we're feeling." It was more than I'd ever expected from him, and yet I found myself hesitating. I've been down this road before, being the first guy for a questioning man, and it rarely ended well. Usually, I ended up with a broken heart while they moved on, having satisfied their curiosity. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not just of getting hurt, but of losing you as a friend if this doesn't work out." Mark reached across the island, his hand covering mine. The touch was simple but electric. "I'm scared too," he confessed. "This is all new territory for me. But I think what I'd regret more is not finding out what could be between us." His words resonated with me. Wasn't that always the greater regret in life? The chances we didn't take, the possibilities we left unexplored? "Okay," I said, turning my hand over so our palms met. "Let's take it slow and see where it goes." The smile that spread across Mark's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, both of us acknowledging the new path we were stepping onto together. That conversation happened 3 weeks ago. Since then, we've been navigating this new dimension of our relationship with careful steps. We've had dinners together, watched movies side by side on my couch, gradually allowing ourselves to sit closer, to touch more freely. Our first kiss happened on my back patio, under the same sun that had witnessed our sunscreen encounter. It was tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger that surprised us both. Mark is still learning, still discovering aspects of himself he never acknowledged before. There are moments of uncertainty, times when he pulls back slightly, processing his feelings. But there are also moments of beautiful clarity, when he looks at me with such openness that it takes my breath away. We haven't told many people yet. His divorce is still fresh, and he's working through what his emerging bisexuality means for his sense of self. My friends know. They've seen the change in me, the happiness that radiates from within, but they're giving us space to figure things out at our own pace. Yesterday, we were in my backyard again, enjoying the summer evening. Mark reached for the sunscreen without a word, a playful smile on his lips. As his hands moved across my skin, slow and deliberate just like that first time, I couldn't help but marvel at how a simple request for sunscreen had changed everything between us. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my stomach. "How lucky I am," I replied honestly, "that you ran out of sunscreen that day." He laughed, leaning down to press a kiss to my shoulder. "I didn't, you know." I turned to look at him, confused. "Didn't what?" "Run out of sunscreen," he admitted, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I had a brand new bottle in my bathroom cabinet. I just needed an excuse to talk to you, to touch you." The confession made me laugh, a warm happiness spreading through me. "You're telling me this whole relationship is based on a lie about sunscreen?" Mark pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around my waist. I prefer to think of it as a strategic omission that led to something beautiful. As his lips met mine, I couldn't help but agree. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments, a neighbor asking for sunscreen on a hot summer day, can change the course of your life in ways you never imagined. And sometimes, what seems impossible, a straight neighbor slowly rubbing sunscreen across your stomach, turns out to be the beginning of something real and precious. Our story is still being written, one day at a time. We're learning each other, discovering the contours of this relationship we're building together. There will be challenges ahead, I know. Mark is still navigating the complexities of his sexuality, and I'm learning to trust that his feelings for me are genuine and lasting. But as we sit in the backyard where it all began, his hand in mine, I can't help but feel hopeful about where this journey will take us. And every time I see a bottle of sunscreen, I smile, remembering how something so ordinary became the catalyst for something extraordinary. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it, sometimes in the form of a neighbor who isn't quite as straight as he first appeared, asking for sunscreen on a sunny summer day. Total _char_count, 18,412.